ready to start, restart, or re-energize your vegan or plant-based practice? You're in the right place. I'm Michelle Olander, and this is Vedge Your Best. Episode 179, the Latina health coach, Karla Salinari. And just like that, it's February, Veg Your Besties. February 2024. And we have our first Veg Your Best interview of the year. You know, the January episodes were full of me, sharing my personal experiences with goals and goal setting and how creating a vegan practice in my 50s, developing vegan and plant-based habits, how that changed my life and how it changed the direction of my life and made, I would say, every single aspect of my life more intentional and positive. And today we have a conversation, talk about positive, with Karla Salinari, the Latina health coach. Karla is the author of Abuela's Plant-Based Kitchen, vegan cuisine inspired by Latin and Caribbean family recipes. You will hear Karla's unique experience of growing up with a vegan father and converting or flipping traditional Latin American and Caribbean dishes into healthy plant-based recipes that always honor the traditions and flavors of her culture. And, you know, it's that respect for and pride in community that has evolved into Karla's work as a certified holistic health coach with a private practice, a member of Next Level Urgent Care, Houston's telehealth team, and now an online community called the Plant-Based Health Academy. I think you'll really enjoy this conversation with Karla Salinari, and you'll hear just why. She's such a popular TV guest expert on NBC and Telemundo. And as you listen, I'd like to challenge you to think about what parts of your culture and community and family might not be quite as difficult as you're expecting as you move in a vegan or plant-based direction. Okay, I'll catch up with you on the other side of the interview. Karla Salinari, author, holistic health coach, so much more. Welcome to Veg Your Best.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure.
It's such a pleasure for me as well. I've been looking at your cookbook. That's where I know you mostly from. Your book is Abuela's Plant-Based Kitchen, vegan cuisine inspired by Latin and Caribbean family recipes. It's a long title and a beautiful title because I think it's something people love, this idea of family recipes and how do we make them work for us and with our ethics and with our health concerns and with our environmental concerns. So that's right. I want to just plunge into everything. But first of all, I want to talk about how you got to this place of working with plant-based recipes and being a vegan educator.
Yes. So my story is an interesting one. So I was born into a vegan household. I am from Puerto Rico, and vegan, plant-based, and Puerto Rico isn't usually something that you have in the same sentence, right? My father has been vegan since 1975, when the movement in Puerto Rico and other parts of the Caribbean, Central Latin America wasn't something that was recognized, much less accepted, right? But, you know, my father, since early on, really believed that this lifestyle was the healthiest lifestyle. And when I was born, I was just kind of like born into it. Now, as I got older, unfortunately, my parents divorced, my mom remarried, and I fell back into a more conventional way of eating when I was with my mom. But when I came back to visit my father in Puerto Rico, I would go back to the plant-based lifestyle. Still to this day, my father continues to follow the lifestyle. All of my father's side of the family has been vegan for many, many years. In fact, they had the first vegetarian restaurant in Puerto Rico in the 90s, and it lasted for about 5 years. Unfortunately, Puerto Rico wasn't ready for that yet. And the restaurant shut down. But what the restaurant did is that they flipped what we like to use the word flip. They flipped a lot of the cultural dishes in Puerto Rico into vegan alternatives. And that's basically what it was. The name of the restaurant was called Comida Vegetariana, which just translates into vegetarian food. And it was that. And my family spent a long time transforming these family traditional recipes into plant-based alternatives. And I like to use the term plant-based a little bit more than vegan, because I think that vegan kind of limits us a little bit. And for us, plant-based is a more, or we consider it a more whole, like more holistic approach to nutrition, where we focus on whole foods rather than ultra processed foods. So I will like to use plant-based. So we turned all of our cultural dishes into plant-based alternatives without sacrificing flavors, without sacrificing textures. And these recipes have been circulating in our family for a very, very long time. And after I moved on to college and grew up and kind of was able to make my own decisions, I went back to the plant-based lifestyle. And it suits me. It's what I'm used to. It's what feels good to me. And I knew that I wanted to turn this into a job, maybe, I don't know, maybe a profession, maybe a way, a vehicle of helping so much of the Latin community implement healthier ways of eating without feeling like they were abandoning their cultures or their traditions or memories, right? There is so much attachment, emotional attachment to our foods. And that was very important. So, went to nutrition school, became a certified holistic health coach, and I started to share my family's recipes, and they were so well received, and the community loved them. So many people couldn't believe that we were able to recreate such popular traditional recipes into alternatives that were actually healthy for them and made them feel good. And that's where this kind of all started. Then during the pandemic, I decided that I wanted to write a cookbook of these recipes for a lot of reasons. Reason number one is because I wanted to share with our community that it is possible to continue to enjoy our traditional recipes in a healthier way. And two, because I wanted to continue to keep these recipes alive, a legacy for my family, if you will. And my mother, my aunt, my father, and myself, all located in different parts of the country, came together virtually to taste test these 75 recipes and create what now became Abuela's Plant-Based Kitchen, published by Simon & Schuster, and such well received by the community. So that's a short Cliff Note version of how this project came to be. And, Michelle, we are living in a time where people are waking up to the movement because they know that it's the healthiest approach to not only reducing the risk of so many food-related conditions, but also to, promoting longevity, which I think is now something that so many people are focused on, is how can I prevent food-related conditions rather than treating them when it's a little too late. So the book has been so well received. It's the first print run sold out a few months after it was released. And I share that not to pat myself on the back, although I do think we've put together a beautiful book, but also because it shows the importance of it. And it not only the importance of it, but how much people need this, right? So that is the story of how the book came about.
Well, I'm glad you took that little victory lap at the beginning of the podcast. I'm really glad because I do think all these successes, they demonstrate that there's really an audience for this information. There's an audience, there's people who, even if they don't necessarily want buy-in right exactly the same way we think maybe they could or should or would, there's people want to lean into it. They want to know more about it. They want to figure out, how is it going to work for my family and for my culture and for my grandchildren or my grandparents, depending on. And I think we should just remind everybody, in case they don't know, abuela means
grandmother in Spanish.
Grandmother. Yes. So Abuela's Plant-Based Kitchen, it's a nod to your actual grandmother and your actual family. So, and I think that is something that keeps a lot of people on edge about leaning more deeply into a plant-based lifestyle, because they think this is going to separate me. This is going to be a bone of contention when I visit my abuela or my babcha in my family.
Sure.
So what do you say to people in terms of that part of it? How do you navigate some of that reticence, that discomfort about, well, but this is what we do at Christmas or at the birthdays?
Yes. So I think it's important to highlight that, at least speaking of Latin food, particularly Puerto Rican food, traditionally the food wasn't as meat heavy as it is now. Back in the day, the average family didn't have the resources or the means to acquire such a large amount of animal protein, right? So most of the foods that they consumed were plant-based, right? Because it's what they were able to grow themselves and provide for their families. So, and I like to use the term, let's go back to basics. What were our ancestors eating, right? For a lot of our ancestors is whatever we had outside. And that was usually root vegetables and plantains and herbs and fruits and things like that. And that's how we ate, right? So that's something that's really important to remind people and to highlight. Now, unfortunately, as time went on and families got busier and women started working outside of the home, it became a little bit more about convenience, right? And we lost some of that, right? But that, like, farm to table. And, it is possible to have our traditional dishes without the meat, right? A staple in Latin foods is rice and beans, and it's a complete protein. It has all the essential amino acids our bodies can't produce on its own. It's what families have lived on for centuries and centuries, right? So I think it's really important to highlight that people can choose to consume animal protein if they wish, but they don't have to. And I think that's something that's really important to understand. I think diet culture has done a really good job at convincing so many people that you have to have protein from animal sources, when we now know that that's not the case. So I think providing that level of education is really important. And it's because it's not spoken about enough. And I think that, sharing that with the community and having our community communicate that to family when they ask, I think it's a great starting point, right? Just saying, hey, listen, like, beans have lots of fiber and they have protein. They also have antioxidants, right? Brown rice is so rich in fiber. Plantains have a great amount of magnesium and potassium, and just building that awareness around the nutrients that the foods have as a way of also explaining, like, hey, you don't need to have the meat, right? And here is a delicious example of a nutrient-dense plate that is completely plant-based. And, I often get the feedback is, wow, I don't miss the meat. I don't miss it. I feel satisfied. I feel good. I feel energized. I don't feel bloated. And I think that, sharing that information helps to kind of ease the transition and also helps people understand, right? I think that's really important.
I think that's beautiful, Karla. I think sometimes these grandparents get a bad rap from their kids and grandkids, that they can't explain anything to them or say what they're trying to do, because mostly if somebody in your family changes drastically some of their choices, you're going to be concerned at first, right? Your first
Sure.
thing will be, why? What's going on? Why do you want to do that? It's not necessarily condemnation, though it might sound like it when you say, why? you know?
Absolutely.
But I think that let's please treat our abuelas and our grandmothers with some respect. Explain to them what you're trying to do. I bet you many more of them are on board. I get a little annoyed sometimes. People go, well, what would I eat at my grandmother's house? I'm like, why don't you talk to her?
Absolutely. I always love to recommend, like, make a delicious plant-based dish and share it. And while you're sharing, and talk about the wonderful health benefits that it has. Chances are people are going to try it and they're going to really enjoy it. And, I have had many patients and clients said, oh, I made this beautiful casserole. And, everybody ate the plant-based casserole and kind of like, push the meat aside, and they just enjoyed it, and they felt lighter yet full enough where they felt energized. And so that is often the feedback that we get, which is so wonderful, because I think that losing that fear around food is the first step into making the transition and understanding how we should eat and how we should build a plate in order to achieve the nutrients that are needed to have our bodies thrive. I think that's such an important factor. And then once we start establishing that, the transition becomes easier. And it also becomes easier to explain to other people why we're making the transition. And who knows, we might plant the seed and other people might benefit from it. And we can create a ripple effect, which is an amazing goal, right?
Yeah, that is the goal, is the ripple effect in terms of health and our environment, in terms of our lifestyles.
That's right.
What is and also, I think most abuelas would be very, very flattered to know that you've come to them and saying, I don't want to put meat in it, but I want to have all the taste. I love that dish. I love the memories. I want to eat this with you and with my grandchildren someday. So I mean, I think what a legacy we're allowing our elders to have in our lives, just because we choose to make it a little bit different nutritionally.
That's right. Absolutely. Yes. And I'll give you an example, Michelle. In Puerto Rico, during the holidays, during Christmas, we make pasteles. Now, pasteles is what they're called. They look like, they're similar to a tamal, right, in Mexican culture. But in Mexican culture, they're made from corn. We make them from root vegetables. So we make them from yautía, plátano. So these are root vegetables, plantains, things like that. And it's time consuming, right? And usually the way that it's done is there's an assembly line, and the matriarch of the family, is the one who leads the way and tells us what to do. And because everybody's usually assigned a task, right, it becomes a family activity that so many people grew up doing, right? Now, one of the recipes that I've shared through the cooking classes that I host is this recipe of pasteles, right? And we talk about, did your grandmother use the banana leaf to wrap the ingredients together? Because usually that's what it is, right? You create kind of like a batter. That batter gets filled, in this case, with vegetables, but traditionally with meat. And then you wrap the mixture in a banana leaf and you boil it. And, it becomes harder and easier to cut and eat, right? So everybody's family has a different technique, and you build community around that. You share memories, you share traditions. Like, there's something to be said about the aroma that fills your home when you're making these delicious recipes, right? It connects us to our tradition. It connects us to our culture. It brings us so much joy and happiness, but we're just altering the recipe a little bit, right? Because, like I was saying before, traditionally, it wasn't all meat heavy, right? So just reminding the community that we could still enjoy all of these recipes and make new memories, right? While keeping Abuela's recipes alive, the way that she, set the table and prepared the assembly line and got everybody in the family included in the process. Like, we're keeping those traditions alive. And I think that that's what really matters, right? I think that that's what people really want. They don't want to give up the traditions. And then when they see that you can still have these traditions and all you did was tweak the recipe just a little bit, people are like, oh, wow, yes. And they become excited about it. And they're, they want to do it. And then they want to get other people involved as well. So that's really great.
I think that's a marvelous visual in Polish holidays. We tend to have these same sorts of in a big family, the same sorts of assembly line with making the pierogis, the stuffed dumplings, or the gołąbki, the stuffed cabbage. So it's that same kind of thing where you can't make it for dozens of people unless everybody kind of helps you do that for the efficiency. And that's the memory, right? That's the holiday, right, is being together.
Absolutely. I just got goosebumps when you said that because it's so true. It's so true.
Yeah. The now some of those recipes I was looking through again today, and there are three. I think I put three that I really want to try. These are from Abuela's Plant-Based Kitchen. The lentil picadillo, mm-hmm, which looks fantastic. The mushroom ropa vieja, mm-hmm, that looked great, and this has been on my list, different kinds, but you have a recipe for making a vegan bacon, in quotes, from shiitake mushrooms. That seems like something I want to try.
Yes. So the VLT is what we call the recipe in the book. That is a more, new age, modern recipe that did not come from Abuela's kitchen, but it did come from the restaurant my aunt and uncle had back then, because they used to make VLTs, but back then they used to make them with a meat substitute called Wellington. I don't know if you remember that from like the 80s and the 90s. It was like one of the first mock meat companies that came out. I don't even think that they exist anymore. But anyway, they would make these BLTs, but with that mock meat, and it was I think it was like pea protein or chickpea flour, but the way that they gave it the flavor was through a combination of liquid smoke, and it's some soy sauce, and it's a tiny bit of maple syrup, and it's so a few ingredients like that, and then you can, because mushrooms absorb moisture so much, the flavors really get in there. And then once you sear it and then you place it in the oven, right, they kind of caramelize with those flavors. And if you create a beautiful sandwich where you add beautiful tomato and greens, and it's such a delightful treat, and the flavor is there. Right. So that recipe is so wonderful. It's one of my husband's favorite recipes because there's so much more he can do with the bacon. We'll call it that, for lack of a better term. And, he adds it to his salads, and he just finds it as such a versatile addition. And he always says, I don't miss the bacon. This is so great, which, I hear time and time again. And so that's one of the recipes. Ropa Vieja is actually inspired by my upbringing in Miami. Miami has a large Cuban population, and it's very, very popular dish where it's made from shredded flank steak. So for this recipe, the only thing we changed in the recipe was we swapped the steak for king oyster mushrooms. And the process of turning the mushrooms into shredded meat was just using 2 forks and gently kind of breaking apart the stem of the mushroom, dehydrating them so that they don't lose the texture and become soggy. But everything else in the recipe is exactly how it's made traditionally, right? So that's the only thing we changed. And that is definitely one of those recipes that has a wow factor. Right? When anybody tries it, they're like, I cannot believe this isn't meat, because the shreds are so similar. The texture is so similar. The flavors are so similar. And the other recipe is also a Cuban-inspired recipe. Picadillo is also a traditional Cuban dish, and it's just ground up meat that is made with potatoes and peppers, and everything outside of the meat is all plant-based, right? So it's the potatoes and the olives and the roasted red peppers and, the garlic and the onions. So we use lentils instead. So it's hearty because of the fiber and the plant protein that is provided by the lentils. And it's also such a versatile dish. You can have it as the Cuban style picadillo with accompanied by sweet plantains and perhaps some white rice, right? But you can also use it in so many other recipes. You can make sandwiches with it. You can use it to stuff taco shells. You can make empanadas with it as well. And that's a lot of what I talk about in the book. It's like you can really take these recipes and use them in so many different ways, right? So it's not just one recipe that you make. It's a simple recipe that can be incorporated into so many other recipes. So once you get the hang of it, you really can turn it into a versatile recipe that you can incorporate other ways.
Well, I noticed that most of the recipes I looked at were they weren't endless ingredients. They were not these really overwhelming recipes, which when I see something that has 14 ingredients, 25 ingredients, I start going, well, maybe not this week. I punt that one. We'll punt that one for another time. But no, your recipes look great. They look so organized and beautiful. Now, a recipe that was, a menu item when I was in Puerto Rico a few times. Is it mofongo? Is that how you say it?
Yes,
I did not see that in your book per se, but maybe I was wondering if maybe there's another name you have for something that's similar to that, or whether that's just for another book.
That is for another book, Michelle. Thank you very much. No, so we did not put mofongo in the book. We stuck with most of the recipes that our family had at the restaurant. And, but to your point, mofongo is another wonderful recipe that it's very easy, can very easily be turned into a plant-based alternative. And I'll explain to you. So basically the way that you make mofongo is you fry the green plantains, the very ripe, long plantains, and then you mash them and you add olive oil and garlic. And for those that consume it with meat, then it kind of gets stuffed. It almost looks like a cave that's hollow inside. So the outside of that cave would be the mashed plantains, but you can make it with sauteed mushrooms and peppers, or you can make it with, soy meat, or you can make it with mushrooms. And, it's all about the flavors and that combination of a saucy vegetable side that goes along with the plantain. So yes, mofongo is another delicious recipe. And now, you brought up that you might have tried that in Puerto Rico. There are so many vegan restaurants in Puerto Rico now. And, it is so amazing to see all of these talented chefs from the island recreating some of our traditional plates into these beautiful plant-based masterpieces. And, I often joke with my dad, because for a very long time, they were not able to go out to eat. It was impossible for them to go to a restaurant and say, hey, listen, we don't eat meat, or, we don't have chicken stock or beef stock. And, and they just wouldn't eat. And, my father will say, he's like, people used to laugh at us. And they wouldn't be lenient and they wouldn't help us. And now it's so different. And it's so wonderful to be able to go to the island and say, hey, I want to continue to enjoy these recipes, but can you just please, hold the meat?
So tell us now. So I think everybody's gotten some a taste of what you have on offer in the book, Abuela's Plant-Based Kitchen. Tell me a little about your practice, your work as somebody helping more and more people choose a more and more plant-based lifestyle and nutritional profile.
Of course. And that's a great question, because it's one that is really important too. So when I started this, I was just sharing recipes. Mm-hmm. And I was, teaching people how to, flip one recipe into something that could be healthier. But then slowly I started to be contacted by people that were reaching out to me saying, hey, my doctor said I have high levels of cholesterol and I should really reduce the overconsumption of, processed meats or meats that are high in trans fat, things like that. And I started to get more and more requests for that. And then the Latina health coach community started kind of changing from a place where people would go for delicious, easy recipes to more of a place where people are going to because they were diagnosed with something, right? And the way that then I implemented a practice, having the credentials and having, the certifications to do so, is that I started taking clients and we would work on what their specific needs were and what their goals were based on whether their doctor was telling them that they had to change something or whether they were just kind of tired of trying to make changes on their own, but felt too scared and too overwhelmed to do it on their own. And it slowly started to grow that way. So something that was just me sharing recipes over the past 5 years has turned more into me helping people transition, right? And I think that a lot of the feedback that I get from the community is the internet is so overwhelming. I don't know what to believe. I don't know what to try. The recipes look complicated. My family doesn't think I should be doing this. And that's how it started. So, unfortunately, most of the Latin community, which is the community that I work with, are either pre-diabetic or they're diabetic and have been on diabetes medication for a very long time, have high levels of cholesterol or are obese or have high levels of blood pressure, right? Their blood pressure. All of this is kind of intertwined, as you know. So once they start dropping the weight, they start regulating their blood sugar levels, their cholesterol. So it's all kind of like a package deal. And the way that I help my patients is that we take it slowly. We identify what their goals are, and then we start implementing change in a way that is gradual. I'll be honest. I don't recommend going plant-based overnight. It should be done in a gradual way because it's important that people understand the why of the changes that they're making, and also that they allow themselves time to adapt their palates, to adapt to different flavor combinations, and to adapt to different textures. And that doesn't happen overnight. And I think if we expect it to, we can lose some patients in the process. Like they'll be like, this is too complicated. I don't know how to build a plate. So we take it with a very slow approach. I teach them, this is how to create a balanced plate. This is what you should be eating. These are some simple ways you can be cooking them. And, the results are in their lab work, right? So usually what I tell my patients is, give me 3 months to work with you, and then we can get your labs rechecked. And 70, 80%, I would dare to say, see really positive changes in their lab work, right? So I do it as private practice, but earlier in 2023, I joined a practice in Houston as one of the nutritionists on their team. And I work with patients that are either diabetic or pre-diabetic. I now am recognized as a healthcare provider. I'm certified by the CDC. So I am certified to lead diabetes prevention courses as well. So my job has kind of morphed into more of a healthcare professional / nutrition educator, because that is where it's needed the most. So the way that I teach my patients, the way that I lead my clients is slow changes, how to do it in a way that seems relatable, using ingredients that they are familiar with, starting with textures that are easy to adapt to. And then we build from there slowly, until they feel like they've kind of gotten a handle on this, and then they can do it on their own. So it's a very gradual process, but wow, is it a rewarding process.
I bet, because I think most people who've spent some time in a plant-based lifestyle we can't believe how our tastes have changed.
It's so incredible. I'll give you I'll share a story. I had a patient come to me a few months ago. The patient received lab work that showed high levels of A1C. A1C is your blood glucose levels, high levels of cholesterol, high levels of his blood pressure was through the roof. And he's like, I don't know where to start. I go to the supermarket and everything has sugar. I go to so it's like, that is a perfect example of how people kind of like are given this diagnosis and the doctor's like, okay, go make healthy changes. And listen, there's a lot to say about our doctors are so inundated with patients. They don't have the time to sit with the patient. Not that they don't want to, they just don't have the time. And, the patient gets this diagnosis, which can be incredibly frightening, right? And then they go into a supermarket and then they don't know what to do, right? So the first thing that I told this patient to eliminate was sugary drinks over ultra processed foods. That's it. I kid you not, Michelle. He came to me 3 weeks later and said, I had a sip of my daughter's Gatorade and could barely swallow it because it was so sweet and it was so pungent and I couldn't stand it. And in just a short amount of time. And this is what I continue to communicate to the community. And that is, we are adaptable creatures. Like our taste buds change, our gut microbiome is constantly changing. And sometimes we don't know how good we can feel, how good our bodies are able to feel until we really implement these changes and give it a chance, right? I have had patients that say to me, I have so much energy, I don't know what to do with it. I sleep so soundly, I wake up and I feel like I could conquer the world. And I think people really need to experience these for themselves in order to really understand what I know you and I know what I'm talking about, right? Like having a meal and saying, I feel amazing, rather than, oh, I'm so bloated, I'm so full, I'm so uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, Karla, I think that's something every once in a while I have to say to people, you don't have to trust me about much, but do trust me that your taste will change, because people will say, I just don't like greens. I just don't like them. I don't like beans. And I always say, please don't now eat 4 cups of beans today. If you've never liked beans, please.
You'll also have so much gas. You would not be able to do, you don't know what to do.
Yeah. You'll hate me. You'll hate me. But think about maybe incorporating a spoonful of beans, a couple times a day, do that kind of thing. Just exposure therapy. You just sometimes have to just go, oh, well, maybe you don't love it, but that's going to be something very important to treat yourself medicinally. You would take your medication if the doctor said take it, you would take it. Okay. So maybe a teaspoon of beans here and there, maybe a couple extra leaves of green. And I think people who can make these switches overnight or almost overnight, they don't need the help. The people who need help are the ones who it's daunting for whatever reason, for their tastes or for their comfort or their family support level, or just their ability to even imagine, what is my life going to look like now without these products, without these foods?
Absolutely. And going back to your point about when we recommend just making small incremental changes, one of the things that I ask my patients to do is to keep a food diary. And food diaries are very useful for a lot of reasons, but also I ask my patients to write, how did you feel after you had this meal? So not only writing down everything they're putting in their mouth, but also how do they feel after they eat it? Because it's such a useful tool when you go back to that food diary 3 weeks later, a month later, and you see energized, less bloating, better sleep, right? And slowly you start to see, because, sometimes we get busy, we forget, but identifying not only the foods that you're eating, but how these foods are helping you feel is such a powerful tool to create long-lasting change.
And these kinds of records, which are so important, are very difficult for most of us to do on our own. The accountability of having a coach or an educator or a specialist who checks in with us periodically really makes that kind of structure so much more possible. I know I would never be able to do a food diary like that without someone saying, "Hello, Michelle, let's see it," reminding.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's something that I ask them to bring to our sessions because we review it together. Right. I had a patient come to me and say, "Hey, this is what I had, and my blood sugar levels were stable and they were good. But then I had grapes and my sugar spiked to 150, which is, pretty high, 150 or almost 200. It spiked." And I said, well, and then we talk about it. It's like, it's not that the eating fruit is spiking your blood sugar level, is having fruit that doesn't have enough fiber in order to slow down that sugar spike, right? Awesome. When we have foods that are high in fiber, it helps the body's natural absorption of glucose to go down. So perhaps if you wanted to have a fruit snack in the middle of the day, let's choose something that has a lower glycemic load. For example, raspberries, which are really high in fiber, right? Blueberries, prunes, right? Instead of having the grape, right? So that food tracking, that food journal is going to give me a window into what is it that they're doing. Now, grapes are not unhealthy, right? But it's understanding and learning how different foods can affect your body, right? And then giving them that alternative. That's why I think food journals and food diaries are so powerful, because one, we often forget what we had, right? And we can often forget how it made us feel. And then if we're trying to reach a goal, which is for this patient was, lowering A1C levels, then these food journals can help us, right? To be able to tweak things here and there and to understand how our bodies are reacting to certain types of foods as well.
And especially valuable if they can look at those food journals with someone who can help them brainstorm and strategize, or even maybe so when you do notice that your glucose level's gone up, that you take a walk, or there's some other kind of thing that you do to help mitigate some of these things. So important to have someone who could realistically help you with those, with what you learn. And this, I think, is partially why you have your monthly community membership now.
Yes, I do. And thank you so much for bringing that up, because it's really helpful. I created this based off of the feedback from the community that I have created on social media. My strongest platform is Instagram, and that's where I have the largest community. And just based on their feedback and helping to answer so many questions, I created a monthly membership program that is at a very, very, very discounted price, because I wanted to make it accessible to a large community of people. So basically, we meet every month, right? And we talk about a trending nutrition topic, or, topics that are really important, like understanding diabetes and how can we prevent, type 2 diabetes, or, another month we'll discuss gut health and we'll talk about gut health. And then we'll talk about supplementations, right? Which is such a hot topic, right? Debunking myths around different food theories and food trends and things like that. And then we also have cooking classes in this monthly membership where I share a recipe that is easy to make. It's entirely plant-based. And I help walk you through making that recipe while teaching you why we chose these ingredients, how to work with these ingredients to achieve X and Y texture, X and Y flavor, X and Y consistency. So I created this because I wanted to create a safe space for our community to feel like they could ask anything, that they can request information, and most importantly, so that they can build community. Because especially like you mentioned before, which is so important, if you're the only person in your family that's doing this, sometimes you may not feel as supported. And not for any other reason other than maybe the people around you just don't know that much about it, right? So in this community, which I call the Plant-Based Health Academy, the community can ask questions in a forum, right? And I answer those questions daily. They have access to me so that they feel like they have someone to go to that can hold their hand should they have any questions. I created a resource library that has meal plans and shopping lists and healthy snack options and swaps so that basically they feel like they have a go-to place to help them with this transition. So in addition to having the Plant-Based Health Academy, I also offer one-on-one coaching, and that's for anyone that's looking for a more personalized approach. We meet every 2 weeks on Zoom. I review their food journals. We talk about how to implement changes to get them to their specific health goals. Everybody's different. Everybody has different things that they're working on, right? So I offer those two products, one which is in a group setting and the other one which is in a more personalized one-on-one setting. And, you know, it really has helped so many of our community members, you know, improve their health, heal their relationship with food, but most importantly, create awareness around the food choices that they're making. Having this educational component is so powerful because when you know better, you do better, right? So if you have the knowledge and you have the information, when you go to the supermarket, it's not going to be so overwhelming and so daunting, right?
I imagine also with that extra handholding and extra education, you can be a better advocate for yourself when you're speaking with your healthcare provider in your appointments, because you can explain and maybe understand what they're telling you a little bit better, the nuances that they sometimes assume you understand or that you're going to go Google. And,
right.
And that you can also maybe explain yourself and what your resistance to it or what's working very well. That just having a little extra fluency in terms of your issues, in terms of how you're trying to change your nutrition.
That is so true. And oftentimes I say to my patient, tell your doctor that you're working with a nutritionist and give me the information that they're giving you. I'm going to help you understand it. And together we're going to come up with a plan. And the doctors are thrilled because it's less work for them so that they can go on and help other people. But they feel good in knowing that I'm going to hold their hand and, like you said, help them understand what is an A1C level, what is considered high, what is considered at risk, right? What should your blood glucose levels be in the morning? What should they be after you eat? Things like that. And just providing that extra level of service and, you know, hand-holding and education and support and accountability is really, really helpful and has proven to so many of my patients and clients that, you know, it is possible to reduce the risk of these food-related conditions. And for so many, you know, get them out of that zone where they're at risk of, you know, having to get on diabetes medication, right? Like we were able to get them out of that risky, you know, part.
Now, you work with your clients in both English and Spanish?
I do. I work with my clients both in English and Spanish. For my Spanish-speaking patients, I create meal plans and shopping lists, everything in Spanish. And then for my English patients, we do everything in Spanish. So I offer bilingual support for my patients and my clients.
Because my listeners typically are English speakers, but they may have family members or friends or community members who are less comfortable in English and might want that level of support.
Absolutely.
It's like sometimes we talk about you want to talk to your doctor and your accountant in your mother tongue.
Yes, exactly. That's so funny. Absolutely. Yes.
Karla Salinari, I wanted to say everybody can find you immediately on Instagram, and that's at the Latina Health Coach.
That's right. Yes. At the Latina Health Coach on Facebook, on Instagram. If you are interested in purchasing a copy of my book, it's all over all major bookstores across the country. So Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Walmart, Target, all carry the book, and it's Abuela's Plant-Based Kitchen. or you can search under my name, Karla with a K, Salinari.
And I saw you on Instagram today. You were at Costco. What happened?
Yes. So my community loves when I do grocery hauls. It's one of their favorite things because, like I say to them, I do the research. I spend the hours at the supermarket. My husband hates it. He hates going shopping with me because I read every single label. So like I say to my community, I do the work so you don't have to. And what I do is that I'll go to popular supermarkets and I'll share foods that are on sale and that are good choices to bring into your home. So I walk down the aisles and I film myself explaining to them not only why is this good, but I'll usually turn it around and we'll read the food label together, and then I'll give you some examples of ways you can incorporate it. For example, there's, great oats, and Farmers We Know is one of my favorite brands. It's non-GMO. It's free of glyphosate. It's so then I talk to them, like a lot of people don't know what glyphosate means, right? And why is it harmful and why we should stay away from it. So I usually kind of give them that little nutrition fact, and then we move on, right? And I just share the products, and I do the same thing for Trader Joe's, and I do the same thing at Whole Foods, and then I do it, at Aldi's or at the supermarkets that I know my community frequents. And that way, when they go to the supermarket, they feel less overwhelmed and they know what they can easily add to their cart and they can use at home. Yeah.
So everybody, no matter what, you should check out Karla on Latina Health Coach on Instagram and Facebook, because there's some stuff you're going to learn right there. And it's fun, and you're such a great role model for all of us who are trying to make good choices for ourselves and also help our friends and families who, we don't want to beat them over the heads. Sometimes we do want to beat them over the head, but it doesn't work.
It's funny that you say that, Michelle, because we have to meet people where they are. And we have to accept that not everybody is on the same journey, and that's okay. And I have had many, many, many followers that, start off kind of questioning everything and then slowly start to come around. And then they'll say, I did meatless Mondays and I felt really good. Or this week, I'm not going to eat meat this entire week. And wow, I felt so good. So I think providing the education, providing the experience, providing the knowledge, and just creating a space that just feels safe is really important. And that's what I do. And I share funny things. Like I have an 8-year-old that, I'm a mom. I deal with school and drop off and laundry and a busy house. And sometimes I don't feel like cooking. And I share my story. I share the real me, right? Because I want people to feel like, hey, this is my friend who's helping me. And that has proven to really be very beneficial for so many people. And I do it from such a place of love and compassion. And, I have made this community my friends. I've run into them at supermarkets. I've run into them at, different places. And they're like, oh my God, Karla, blah, blah. And I feel like they're my family. They've become my family too. And like I said, we've created a beautiful community.
We're going to let that be the last word. Karla Salinari, thank you so much for joining us today on Vedge Your Best.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what did you think of Karla? You can find Karla Salinari instantly on Instagram and Facebook as the Latina Health Coach. And her 2023 Abuela's Plant-Based Kitchen from Simon & Schuster is available everywhere and anywhere you find books. And her website, her links to her practice, and the new Plant-Based Health Academy, that's all going to be in the show notes for today's episode. Now, in Vedge Your Best news, you can look for me on the Organized Coach podcast with Tracy Hoth. And I've mentioned Tracy here and there. Tracy is my fabulous coach. She's been working with me as I set up my systems this year to rethink, plan, and streamline. I think those are my goals. My digital files, especially my digital files, which have been all over the place. And I want to make it a little bit cleaner, faster, easier to support all the content I want to produce for you guys, my Veg Your Besties, this year. And of course, in the years ahead. And I'd like to do it while still being a loving and effective wife, mom, grandmother, friend, citizen. So Tracy Hoth, the Organized Coach podcast, you can look for me there to see me at my vulnerable self. And on the citizen front, one of my goals is to be a good grandmother, wife, friend, citizen. Okay? How are you on the citizen front? You know you can call and email your elected officials, right? My senators and representatives all got a note from me last week. And it's very possible your elected officials need to hear from you. Because when they only hear from us when we vote once a year, our politicians, in their defense, they have to imagine or assume what it is we want from them. And I think we all know that there are squeaky wheels and deep pockets that keep trying to define the conversation and the direction of that conversation in our politics. So maybe that's a 2024 habit you'd like to be developing, connecting more often with some of your elected officials. Maybe today all you do is you Google their emails or their office phone numbers and put them into your phone or your email contacts. And maybe you let them know when you're ready what you are looking for them to support, or remind them of areas that your community still needs leadership in or problem solving on. I know, we're all fully booked. I get it. But maybe today, maybe you just Google one of those people that your tax dollars are supporting. Or maybe like many of us, you've forgotten or aren't quite up to date on who your local official is now. Today could be a great day to find out that one thing. Don't make this hard. Make it powerful. Okay, kids, happy February. And until next week, Veg Your Best.
Veg Your Best podcast production, music, and editing by Charlie Weinshank. Thanks, Charlie. Before you go, it would mean so much to me and the Veg Your Best team if you would hit subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, or share with someone you think might be interested. Something about algorithms, it helps bump us up a little in the rankings, and that's the best way to help others find the podcast and for us to find our audience. So, until next week, make it easy and veg your best.